any immigrant group that you want to call, during their heavy period of oppression, sought and got equality by attaining some political offices, by attaining social power, by attaining economic power within their own vicinity?
Of course. I think this is right, John.
Then why the opprobrium that's cast upon it now? Is it because people think it means violence?
I think Mr. Carmichael indicated when he almost shut out the rest of us. He shuts out the white man. He emphasizes this is a definition. I think at one time you said that the definition of black power has to be made by the black man, and you continually refer to this. And this makes, it seems to me, this puts into question the whole problem of integration, which certainly means bringing the American Negro into the mainstream of our life.
That's what it means to you. Can you define integration?
Well, that's a very difficult thing.
Well, how would he define it? How would you define it?
I would define it as the coming together of two cultures, not one culture being absorbed. What you pose is a Negro, bringing the Negro into the American life, which is a life which is characterized by whiteness, is to say that I must lose my identity in order to gain my equality.
I don't think that's true at all.
As
John pointed out, well, wait a minute now. As John pointed out,
that's right.
Well, wait a minute. John pointed out the various groups in this country, ethnic groups, have been absorbed into our culture, but a little bit of what they brought has rubbed off on all of us. Certainly the heritage of the Irish and the heritage of the Poles and the heritage of the Jews.
Mr. Schultz, don't you think the main difference is that there was never any major nationwide Polish riots, Irish riots, Italian riots? There's not even any Indian riots. The only people that have tried to get this equality business
let's be factual about it. The ancestors of mine, of Irish ancestry, did some fighting in the streets too. In areas where they were not given employment, areas in which they were not allowed to practice their religion.
Did they shoot at firemen and policemen and snipe at them and burn buildings and hundreds of millions of dollars?
I would have to say I don't know, Mr. Rockwell, but I'd also have to say in the present instance, I don't know what percentage of 26 million Negroes are involved in this. And I'm not excusing vandalism, I'm not excusing violation of the law, hooliganism.
Mr. Manager, there's one major thing that you're forgetting. Your people fit it. The Irish fit. The Italians fit, the Poles fit. They all can fit in as Americans. His people don't fit. When they are put into a modern urban setting, the average Negro simply can't make it. He just doesn't have it. This is a fact. And it's been proven over and over again because the white people move away from them. They tear down.
What about neighbors of mine?
Well, you may have some middle-class Negroes who have a lot of white blood. The average Negro in the ghetto is not capable of getting out on his own. It's been proved again and again. The example is my leader here in Chicago lived in a housing unit which was integrated, and one time when the heat wasn't turned on fast enough for him, the Negroes tore off all the doors and window frames and burned them in their bathtubs for heat. The white people didn't do that, and as a result they howled that their place was a wreck, it was a slum. Well, certainly because they did it.
Stokely, what do you say?
Am I a black person with white blood?
I imagine you got a little white blood somewhere.
Why?
Because you're a little bit more intelligent than the average.
I was about to say that's why you have black blood in you.
I got black blood now.
Do you have black blood in you?
Have you got any proof of that? If
No,
you can prove it,
you
you can put me out of business awful quick.
You're saying that because I have white blood it makes me smart?
Not makes you smart. What I will say is that I have found out that you mentioned W.E.B. Du Bois, the author of the word Black Power. I'll point out that he's a communist, by the way, an admitted communist who went to Ghana. W.E.B. Du Bois, you couldn't tell from a white man. Most of the Negroes that I have seen, even Elijah Muhammad, they look white.
What about me?
Edward Brooke. Well, you look darker than most of them. Maybe you're a little dumber. I don't know. But I must say, I agree with your tactics. You're on the right track.
Where is your science? I think we ought to put
Are you
this in
saying that
perspective.
because one has white blood it makes one intelligent? And
No, not necessarily. I say that the white average is higher than the black average, and when you mix them, you get an intermediate grade in the average. But I will admit that once in a while you can have a Negro who's almost white, and he's very brilliant. And I think that Malcolm X admitted that he had white blood and he was brilliant.
Would you agree that they have shown scientifically that there's nothing different in the brain of a Negro as compared to the brain of a person of white ethnic background?
The facts
that makes their capabilities any different of attainment?
Proven of Harvard has proved again and again the average Negro brain is lighter than the white brain.
But the capacity to acquire has to come through education and culture, doesn't it?
Well, you try giving some education and culture to these creeps down here in the west side and the south side who are shooting at people and tearing people up and shooting each other.
I think that Mr. Carmichael should speak to that more than I. He said, can the Negro make it, Stokely, with the opportunities being presented to him?
Well, it occurs to me, Mr. Rockwell, that black people can't make it with the exploitation and oppression that continues from white people, which you yourself admit.
Mr. Carmichael,
May he have a chance to
Sure,
finish,
go
please?
ahead.
He has to
Excuse me, go
It
ahead.
seems to me that if those barriers were removed, that black people would make it. I mean, it's clear to me that in the West Side, we don't
Mr.
know
Carmichael, the more barriers that are removed, the more riots they have. The barriers have been removed up here. That's where they have the
Let me say
riots. Down
something.
south, they have the barriers.
Mr.
They have
Rockwell, you
riots.
banter around all sorts of scientific information of which we have no record of here. You yourself admit that when I said that I have Negroes in my acquaintance that don't tear the radiators up and so forth, you said, well, they're middle-class Negroes. Isn't it legitimate to think that the lower-class Negro in this country could aspire to this middle-class status, which you find so important?
The middle class...
And aren't figures available, and I know they are every year, showing that there are more Negroes entering the great middle class?
I would have to agree, sir, if they actually had any record of doing this. But the facts are that the masses of Negroes, represented by this man wearing dungarees and an old shirt and so forth, the masses of ghetto Negroes can't do it, won't do it, and I heard an interview just last night on the TV from...
What is your basis for this? How do you know they can't do it?
Performance, sir. Just like in college when we were graded, the guys that got the top grades were the ones that performed. These people simply do not perform. All over this country, all over this city, you will find Negroes getting preferential treatment in jobs, and they can't hold it. When they get fired, they holler discrimination.
What kind of education have they had? What is their background? What kind of background do their parents have? Did you ever look into that?
Mr. Schultz, in the history of our country, in the history of our race, all our people, your people and his people, whenever the schools were improper or something was wrong, they got together and did something about it for themselves, which is why, again, I have to agree with Mr. Carmichael here. I think he's a nationalist whether he admits it or not. He wants to go for self like the Muslims do, and I agree that's what they should do. The Muslims have a program that I have to agree with.
Well, I'm not going to argue for Mr. Carmichael, but I think Mr. Carmichael's point is that he is not a part of the white establishment, and it's the white establishment that he maintains has not given them the...
And it's never going to give it to him. He admits it here in Jet. He says the white establishment is not going to mix.
I'm saying that the white establishment has to remove the barriers. Just remove them.
They won't do it, Mr. Carmichael. You're going to have to remove them the way you've been trying to do out in the streets. And when you do, you're going to get shot.
Well, you're trying to force them into a violent organization from nonviolence, is that
I'm not trying to force them. I have been predicting for years that this liberalism of people like Mr. Schultz and possibly yourself, I don't know, but these liberals who have been preaching that if we take away the barriers, they'll do better and better, the fact is in performance, they do worse and worse. The more you give them, the more they riot. The riots are not in Alabama and Mississippi, they're up here.
What is your basis for that last statement?
Well, the fact that I haven't heard of any major Negro riots where the Negroes just start tearing up the city in any of the southern states, and I hear them all in the northern states, where they have less barriers. In the south, you have the barriers.
Why do you think that is?
I think because up here they have taken down the barriers. And when you let monkeys out of the zoo, you're liable to have a pretty wild time in the streets. That's exactly what I think it is.
Do you think most white Americans agree with you?
I am absolutely sure the man in the street does. I don't think the middle-class people, the editors and the physicians and so forth, because they don't have to live with the Negroes. But you try an American working man that has to live in a Negro neighborhood, and you ask him whether he agrees with it.
You don't think they believe with your description of monkeys in the zoo, do you know?
Well, I was using that as an exaggeration, as a hyperbole. And what I'm saying is,
but it's
I
a
believe in
hyperbole that's double-edged. It can contain with it an element of hate where you would hope to please those
I
who
would
look
say,
at where
listen,
that started
just
thing.
today again, I was almost arrested by a police officer who thought I was involved in something, and when he found out who I was, you would have thought I was the president arriving. The white working man is fed up with what the Negroes are doing.
Just a minute. There are 10,000 policemen in Chicago.
Well, this wasn't one of the black ones, I can tell
Well,
you.
I'm just saying, you engage, if you don't mind my saying so, in
Generalities?
generalizations from one policeman, you decide that this is the way.
Let's go to the other side.
And I don't even know whether I have to take you at your word.
I can only go back
That's
again to what I found out. I've been in many a jail. In fact, we've been thinking of getting the Duncan Hines Guide to the Jails of America out, and perhaps Mr. Carmichael will help me on it. But in any case, what I have found out with the Negroes in jails were that the Negro masses, which is what you meet in jails, the poor Negroes, were all for Malcolm X. All the time I was reading in your liberal newspaper that everybody despised Malcolm X and he was an extremist. Well, I found out the masses of Negroes were for Malcolm X, and I bet you the masses are for Mr. Carmichael right now. And I believe that what I'm saying is that the Negro mass